Yo, what's up, jokers? I already took notes on all this, so you ain't gotta sit through all of it. So I'm gonna just get through that, and then I'll talk about stuff as we go or afterwards. So let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about visuals. We know the game looks good, looks amazing, great. They have the same technology they use in NBA 2K. The game looks good. We got that part. Destructible objects / updated physics. Things are different and not as canned when it comes to objects, but that's kind of like, I mean, I guess it's cool. I like the steel chairs bending and stuff like that because those were a feature in the old games, like on Raw on the Xbox. The chairs used to come all the way apart, and you can use those parts as weapons. They don't do that anymore, but it's whatever. They have new animations in the game, and there's a lot more like selling of moves and things that happen, which I think is cool. But then you run the risk of running into the same issues you have in 2K, where animations kind of rule the game, and that could be an issue in 2K depending on how the reversal system actually works, because it's already bad enough now. If you're in certain animations in 2K19 or 2K20, you can't do anything, like you can't reverse. That's why if you ever see me play against people online and they get out of the ring constantly and they slide back in, I'll let them slide back in all the time because they can't reverse that move while they're getting up because of the animation. And I'm hoping that's not a thing in 2K22 since they're adding even more animations, but we won't know, right? Quote unquote responsive controls. They've been saying this for a long time, and that's always been an issue. Even for me, like you try to do one thing and the game has you do something else. I think it was 2K19 where it was like a pain for me to Irish whip people. So like, I hope they actually fix that and aren't just saying that. One thing they've been using through this entire campaign, quote unquote fun. If you don't know, fun is not a blanket statement. It is very subjective to the person that is playing it. They're clearly aiming this at a certain group of individuals, and that's fine. But like, the rest of us have to actually play the game too, So I don't feel like there's going to be something for everyone here, but that's just, like I said earlier on, I'm hoping when I actually play the game, it's a lot different. It's just quote unquote fun, pick up and play with. It's having heavy emphasis on button mashing. Ever since they started talking about the game, it's just fun, button mashing. That's like all I hear a lot. Like this camera angle, like with Kane, like that looks really good, right? But the game looks good. I already know it looks good. As far as the control goes, it's going to be, the gameplay is centered around your light attacks, your heavy attacks, and your grapple. It's 3 buttons. Reminds me of Virtua Fighter. This game is heavy. It's more like a fighting game than a quote unquote wrestling game from what they've discussed in this video. So if you're not really a fan of fighting games, but then you might be a fan of this game because they reward you for button mashing. So more into that later. I'm getting off track. So those are your main 3 buttons: light, heavy, and grapple. They also go into combos, so you can do like light, heavy, grapple. That's a combo. There are going to be custom combos in the game. The mashing pin system is back. Like you just mash until this circle fills up and you kick out, which is again, I'm not really a big fan of that, but it is what it is. They didn't show any submissions, but I'm going to assume it's the same system, which is also unfortunate. The meter in 2K, the past 2Ks, where you just hit A or X, whatever console you're on, when it hits the green point, like the timing system, that was amazing, especially for online. Do you know how hard it is to mash out of stuff online? Have y'all actually played any of these games online? It's not fun. The submission system, arguably the previous system I enjoyed it once I learned how to use it, but it is what it is, right? Okay, so now defensive options, because when it comes to fighting games, because this is essentially a fighting game, I very much care about what defensive options are in, because that's important for obvious reasons. So first of all, I just talked about the combo system, right? They're going to have breakers like Killer Instinct to stop combos, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that, because you're talking about everybody just mashing, and it makes me feel like, all right, well, I should just not ever use combos because people are just going to mash, and then you don't actually have to guess the correct button. You can just mash and get out of you know what I'm saying? The regular counter stops everything else. So the breaker specifically stops combos. It doesn't stop anything else. Counters stop everything else. And then block stops everything except for grabs. And I feel like for a game that there's specifically talking about making things easier, you just kind of made being defensive complicated. You could have thrown all of this out and just brought back the block or dodge system from Here Comes the Pain or from the 64 games, which I thought they were going to do, but they did that but made it more complicated. You didn't really need to... You didn't have to go there to get to where you were trying to go. You could have just did this a completely different way. And then you have dodge, which is parry. Essentially, if you play like Third Strike or pretty much any fighting game that has a parry, which is pretty much like it's counter but as a bigger risk reward. Like blocking, if you block a move, you can punish them for it essentially. Like it sounds very complicated, like more complex than it needs to be. And then it's like the depth. This is not really depth, right? I can learn all of this and I'll know all of this, but that doesn't really mean a whole lot when you could have done the same thing in a lot more simple way. And then like when you're grounded, they didn't say you can use block or dodge or any of that, right? But when you're grounded, you can either mash buttons, mash again to get up faster, or use meter to quick rise. I'll talk about the meter in a second because there is meter in this game. I'll talk about that in a minute. But they didn't say any of that is grounded, so you didn't say anything to address the most OP move in 2K, which is the grounded stomp. Like I feel like that's something they just didn't do anything about. Like that's still gonna be an issue in my opinion, right? So they have a new HUD. There is your health bar still there. You have a special meter. It's a special meter. If you play fighting games, you know it's a special meter. You use it specifically for signature moves. Paybacks are still in the game, and defensive actions. But they didn't specify which defensive actions. So is that tied to counters? Is that tied to blocks? Is that tied to your parries or dodge? Because we already know breaker is just for combos and they're always going to work, so it's not for breakers. So is it just for the other three? Is it just for one or two specifically? Are you always going to be able to block? Like things they didn't really talk about, right? There's no reversal stocks anymore, so you can reverse forever, which is a problem, honestly. There is no stamina meter anymore, and they brought some slander about that because you know it was very much a game of meter management, and it still is. So I don't really understand what the move away from that was, because you still have to manage your special meter for your payback and your defense. You know, you still have to manage that. And the finish meter is separate, so it's like your ultra if you play Street Fighter 4, or you know, like it's an ultra, so you're always going to be able to generate your finisher completely separate from your special meter. Oh my, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. There's a stun meter. Like I said, it's very much like a fighting game. There's a stun meter. So in my opinion, it's just going to be, the game is going to be moving around what generates stun, so you can, you know, have more advantage than your opponent. And currently the only information they put out in this video was that light attacks build stun, you know, rewarding mashing again. So you just, you know, mash your light button and then win the game. But that's just what it sounds like to me. And it's just like, I feel like it's just a lot of, it's very complicated. I'm trying to talk and I can't because it sounds way more complicated than it's supposed to be. But at the same time, they're saying it's more simple than past games, but you're doing a whole lot to do things that can be really simplified from what you currently are doing. And it's like you're doing a lot, you're trying to make it fun and accessible, but then you added a bunch of complicated stuff that you could have really simplified to get to the same point that you're going to. Like, we want to make the game simple. Okay, don't do this because it's not really simple, and there's still a lot of things that just aren't answered whatsoever. And I'm just hoping that we get more information and gameplay, because they're going to be at FanFest on the 19th, the day after my birthday, and tell us some more things or address some little tiny things that maybe some veterans have issues with, like myself, like the stomp. What are you doing about grounded stomp? Because don't tell me I can quick get up, because that didn't work when we had quick rise as a payback. You still got punished for using your quick rise. So if you're going to tell me I can get up faster just to be at a disadvantage, you didn't really change much about a situation that happens all the time in the game. And I would like to know how the animations that you added actually affect you being able to reverse or do things in the game. Oh man. So it's a long video, and they just put out a bunch of stuff, and they gave me more questions than they gave me answers to anything. Personally, just not the biggest thing for me in this whole 16-minute video was that the Thunderdome is going to be in the game. Everything else just left me more confused than I was before we started. It just seems like it's just more like a fighting game. You can already see, like, look at Damian Priest's health bar. It doesn't regenerate. It just goes down and down the further you go. And at some point, you're not going to be able to kick out of that pin at all, which is what I loved about the older or the current system. At any point, you can still kick out of that pin. It can be very difficult, but you can kick out of that little sliver of health. Like, you can get out of those submissions. Like, but when you get moved to the match system at a certain point, the game is just over. And it's just, you know, I like I said, I have way more questions than answers from this video, and you didn't really make me feel any better than I did going into it. So hopefully we get some more info, and hopefully, you know, I can just find something to enjoy about the game when it comes out. But, you know, until then, I'm gonna catch y'all jokers later.